Jake had always believed that love wasn't just about passion. It was about the quiet moments, the unspoken gestures that bound two people together, the warmth of a shared blanket on a lazy Sunday morning, the whispered conversations deep into the night when the world outside ceased to exist. For 5 years, he and Emily had lived in those moments effortlessly, their love feeling as steady and unshakable as a sunrise. But lately, something had shifted. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a subtle change in her routine, a delay in coming to bed, an excuse of exhaustion, or a lingering headache. Jake told himself it was temporary, just the ebb and flow that every couple went through. But as the night stretched into weeks and the weeks into months, the distance between them grew more apparent. Emily wasn't just pulling away physically. She was retreating from him entirely. He tried to rationalize it. Work had been stressful for both of them. Life had its demands, and exhaustion could steal even the most passionate of embraces. But deep down, unease settled in his chest like a heavy stone. Was it really just stress? Or was there something she wasn't telling him? One evening, as they lay in the silent darkness of their bedroom, Jake reached for her hand beneath the covers. A simple touch, one that once would have made her smile and intertwine her fingers with his. But this time, she tensed. The rejection stung more than he wanted to admit. "What's wrong?" he asked softly, his voice barely more than a whisper. Emily sighed, rubbing her forehead as though the weight of his question was too much to bear. "Jake, I'm just not feeling it tonight. Please, not now." But it wasn't just tonight. It was every night. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he withdrew his hand and stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence stretch between them like a chasm. She was right there beside him, but she felt a million miles away. A painful thought wormed its way into his mind. Was she no longer attracted to him? Had she fallen out of love? Or worse, was there someone else? The possibility made his stomach twist, but he didn't dare voice it. That night, as Emily drifted into an undisturbed sleep, Jake lay awake, staring into the darkness. Something had to change. The next morning, he made a quiet but resolute decision. If Emily no longer craved his affection, he would stop offering it. No more reaching for her hand in passing. No more kisses stolen in the kitchen. No more lingering gazes in the hopes she might meet his eyes with the same tenderness she once had. He wouldn't beg for her love, nor would he demand answers she wasn't ready to give. At first, she didn't seem to notice. In fact, she almost looked relieved. That hurt more than Jake wanted to admit. Days turned into weeks. He started coming home later, spending more time at the gym, saying yes to drinks with friends when he would have once hurried home to be with her. He dusted off his old guitar, letting the melodies fill the void she had left behind. If Emily noticed a shift in his behavior, she didn't say anything. Their conversations became transactional, grocery lists, utility bills, reminders about social obligations. There was no warmth, no laughter, just a hollow echo of what they once were. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. Jake had just finished eating dinner alone when he heard the front door open. He didn't bother looking up at first. He had long since stopped waiting for her. But as Emily hesitated in the doorway of the kitchen, something in her expression made him pause. She looked uncertain, almost fragile, as if she wasn't sure she belonged there anymore. "Jake," she said softly, "can we talk?" He turned off the faucet, drying his hands on a dish towel before facing her. "About what?" She bit her lip, a nervous habit he used to find endearing. "Us, I guess." He crossed his arms. "What about us?" She hesitated, searching his face as if looking for reassurance, or maybe for anger. "I feel like you've been distant lately." A bitter chuckle escaped him. "That's funny. I could have sworn I was just giving you what you wanted." Emily flinched at his words. "That's not fair, isn't it?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "For months, I tried. I tried to be patient, to understand, to be there for you. Every time I reached out, you pulled away. And now that I've stopped, suddenly you want to talk." She looked down, gripping the hem of her sweater. And for the first time in a long time, Jake saw something in her expression he hadn't expected: guilt. His heart pounded. "Emily, if there's something you need to tell me, just say it." She exhaled shakily. There is... His stomach twisted. Is there someone else? Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. No. Jake! No. It's not that. It's not that I don't love you. Then what is it? She swallowed hard before finally sitting at the kitchen table, wringing her hands. I didn't want to admit it, she began. I thought I could handle it on my own. But I can't. She hesitated, then whispered, I think I'm depressed. Jake felt the air leave his lungs. She continued, her voice raw. I didn't know how to explain it. At first, I thought I was just tired or stressed, but it didn't go away. The more I tried to push through, the worse it got. And the worse it got, the harder it was to tell you. I started withdrawing, not just from you, but from everything. Work, friends, myself. She let out a broken sigh. And every time you reached out, I felt guilty, because I knew I was hurting you, but I didn't know how to fix it. Jake's throat tightened. He had been so caught up in his own pain, his own fear of losing her, that he had never considered she might be drowning in her own. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, his voice gentler now. Emily, her eyes glistened as she looked up at him. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't want to lose us, Jake. I don't know how to find my way back. A silence stretched between them. But it was different this time. Not cold, not distant, just heavy with everything unspoken. Jake reached across the table, his fingers brushing over hers. And this time, she didn't pull away. Jake sat in stunned silence, his heart aching as Emily's words settled over him like a heavy weight. He had spent months assuming the worst, believing that her distance was a quiet confession of lost love, that her rejection was a slow unraveling of everything they had built together. But now, sitting across from her, he realized he had been blind to the silent war she had been fighting within herself. Why didn't you tell me? He asked softly, his voice thick with emotion. Emily lowered her gaze, her fingers tightening around the hem of her sweater. I was ashamed, she whispered. I didn't want you to see me like this. I thought if you knew, you'd get tired of me. And then, when you started pulling away, I thought maybe you already had. Jake felt something inside him splinter. How many nights had he lain awake, convinced she no longer wanted him? How many times had he retreated, thinking she had already left him in every way that mattered? And all along, she had been trapped in a storm she didn't know how to navigate, afraid that if she let him in, he would turn away. Reaching across the table, he took her trembling hands in his grip gentle but firm. Emily, he murmured, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. You don't have to go through this alone. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her walls cracking at last. I don't want to lose you, Jake, she admitted, her voice barely more than a breath. I know I've been pushing you away, but I don't want that anymore. I want to get better. I need your help. A lump formed in Jake's throat, but he swallowed it down. There had been anger, hurt, and doubt, but none of it mattered more than her. He squeezed her hands gently, his gaze steady. I'm here, he promised, and we'll figure this out together. It wasn't a magical fix. Healing wouldn't happen overnight. But in that moment, they had taken the first step. They made a plan, one built not on expectations, but on understanding. Emily agreed to see a therapist, to face the weight she had been carrying with the help she needed. And together, they worked on rebuilding, on reconnecting in small, simple ways before worrying about the deeper intimacy that had once come so naturally. They started taking evening walks again, just like they used to, breathing in the crisp night air side by side. They shared quiet breakfast without the distraction of phones or rush schedules. They found laughter in the little things, inside jokes that had been buried beneath months of silence. Slowly, the space between them began to shrink. Weeks turned into months. And with each passing day, Emily's smile became a little less forced, her laughter a little more genuine. The shadows that had once dulled her eyes began to fade, replaced by a light Jake had feared was gone forever. One evening, as they sat curled up on the couch watching a movie, Emily shifted closer, resting her head against his shoulder. It was such a small thing, yet it made Jake's breath catch in his throat. I missed this, she murmured, her fingers brushing against his arm. A warmth spread through Jake's chest, and he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Me too. That night, as they climbed into bed, Emily reached for his hand beneath the covers, not out of obligation, not because she felt like she had to, but because she wanted to. Jake intertwined his fingers with hers, feeling the silent promise in her touch. It had been a long road, and there would still be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, he really knew, that they were going to be okay, and that was enough.